Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Root Institute. My name is Vanessa Luca. I am the editor in chief of the Root, and today we have three incredible trailblazing women with us we're going to talk about kind of like the state of grassroots organizing. We're going to talk about how we were able to turn the state of Georgia blue, and we're hopefully going to come out of this with some action steps that we can all take to make sure that we are not losing what is our right to have. So I'm going to actually start with Melanie. If you could introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Latasha and then Glynda.
Well, first of all, thank you, Vanessa, and it's so good to see you. So I head up the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Women's Roundtable, and so we've been just continuously working to make sure Black women's leadership, one, is respected, two, that we leverage our power in any and all ways that we can. So working with my sisters that are on here and all of us making sure that we are able to continue to lift each other, because this work is hard and it's exhausting at times, but we know what I have to do with being in leadership, right? You have to find a way to balance it out. So that's been the broader way of doing it, focusing in, quite frankly, since the election of 2020, have not had a real break in continuing to fight against those who don't believe in inclusion or don't believe that this country is something that all of us should have an opportunity in, but also fighting to make sure the people that we took, that our folks took in our lives in our hands by going out and vote, see some results from that. In the middle of a pandemic that's not going away. And then also focusing very, very, very laser focused around the issue of voting rights protections, because that's under attack. And then now even expanding to dealing with issues around attacks on women's right to control our bodies with what's going on in Texas. So just a consistent drumbeat of organizing and activism that we are continuing to stay involved in, but also looking for opportunities to have some wins on other fronts as well.
Thank you, Melanie. Latasha.
Good morning. Thank you, Vanessa, for having me. I'm really happy to be on this platform. I'm extremely excited to be sharing space with these two sisters who constantly do the work and are on the front line. So just that in itself, whenever I see either one of them, I know that I am in the right space. And I think this is indicative of something that I think to even lift up around how Black women are in relationship with each other. Around this work, that part of our ability to be able to push this work is the nature and the depth of our relationships to work when it ain't sexy, when it ain't no cameras around, we still out there supporting and lifting each other up. And so I'm LaTosha Brown. I am co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund, Black Voters Matter Capacity Building Institute, and the Southern Black Girls and Women's Consortium. And all of the work that I'm currently leading is around in this question around how can we build Black independent power in a way that we literally can advance our communities, centering us in a frame of self-determination. So our work is really not about getting people to believe in a system that they've been subjected to, a system that has been racist, a system that has been fundamentally unfair and unjust to us. But our work has been rooted in this whole notion that we have power, and that collectively, when we operate and organize ourselves, we can direct that power in such a way that we can advance the conditions in our communities and also transform not only the lives of ourselves, but I got the audacity to believe that Black folks are going to change the world, that we fundamentally are going to change the world and make it better for all of us. And Black women are going to be on the front lines leading this, as these sisters are doing here currently. And so in that space, the work that we've been doing specifically around voting, with Black Voters Matter, while yes, the name of our organization is Black Voters Matter, and not Black votes, because we want to make that distinction. There are a lot of people that care about Black votes, but don't care about Black voters. And so our work is rooted in this notion that people matter. At the center of all of our work, at the center of any change is going to be the empowerment and the propelling and the vision of people. And that when people decide to move forward and we collectively tap into our power, then there's nothing that can stop us. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Glynda.
Thanks, Vanessa. Appreciate your long-term support of all of our work, and your rooting the conversation around the narrative around Black African Americans, but more importantly for this conversation today with these powerful Black women. We certainly know that Black women lead, and that's the work of Higher Heights. How do we continue to unleash the organizing power of Black women? We are the architects of this democracy, and we continue to be the defenders of this democracy. And I think in this moment, now more than ever, Black women are demanding our return on our voting investment, and that is in the form of policies that directly impact Black women, our families, and our communities. And certainly what you've seen over the last election cycles, we continue to see more Black women claiming seats at decision-making tables. Why elect Black women? The Black women who are leading at Capitol Hill to the White House, from city halls to state houses, are showing that our leadership not only centers Black women and our families and our communities, it is actually a leadership that transcends race, ethnicity, social economic background, and geographical locations. Our leadership was built for this moment as we are fighting, dual pandemics, from a health crisis to a voting crisis to literally the crisis of this democracy. People are seeking to dismantle democracy. And so I'm excited about the conversation today about how do we engage Black women's political leaders. Higher Heights has broadened that definition. Oftentimes when you hear political leaders, people think about elected Black women or activists and organizers like Melanie and Latasha, but our mothers and great grandmothers and daughters are political leaders. And we've informally been leading the politics of our communities in a way that helps move this country forward.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much to all three of you for being here and for sharing and the just incredible work that you do. Latasha, you mentioned that you specifically say voters matter. So that means people matter, right? What are you hearing? I'd love for each one of you to talk about what are you hearing from the people right now, and what are we most concerned about in this moment?
That's an excellent question. Being that we're sitting in the middle of the largest health pandemic, none of us have experienced this in our lifetime, right? And many of us, we thought 2020, at the end of the day, we thought that, now we're in the midst of another wave, of rise of another wave. And so because of that, I'm hearing different conversations now. There's a sense of urgency and anxiousness. People are tired, but what I will say unequivocally, people are committed. Folks are if they were expected, if there's some expectation that people going back into the box, that is not the case, right? People are literally in a space that they're frustrated and they're demanding that even in our agenda, that for people to come out in 2020, they expect something for it. There's been this vicious cycle throughout the years of, we're going to show up and we're going to vote and they're going to do what they want to do. Right. And on some level, people may be upset, but they're whatever. No, people are livid. Folks are saying, no, enough is enough. People are fed up and enough is enough. We showed up and we expect people that we showed up for to show up. But aside from that, we're not going to allow folks just to continue to attack our humanity. And so as we've been going out in communities, what has been interesting is oftentimes I'm going into a community where we're going organizing, and I'm expected, they're asking me to come in and do a talk or encourage the crowd. The crowd is encouraging me. I'm sitting there like, what? That's right, we can do it, right? And so there's something very powerful about, if this rise of white supremacy was designed to make us be discouraged and just take some place in one, that's ahistorical, because that is not how Black people respond. Let me say that. But secondly, it has done the opposite. I think that there are young folks who have been politicized in ways that they're taking leadership in ways that I've not seen before, at least in my lifetime. There are intergenerational work that is happening across the board, they're people, or they're folks that are talking about and asking me about voting rights that fundamentally throughout the years, they've never really shown any real interest other than, okay, I vote. And so I'm saying that because there is something that is changing. And I also want to offer that part of the resistance, people see the writing on the wall. Folks know that part of this resistance is in response to the fact that we are advancing. It's not that it's in response because we're losing, we're winning, right? And so that is, and those of us, particularly those of us that have done work in Black communities and in the Deep South, we know that there's always a backlash when there's ever Black progress. But the one thing that our opponents constantly do is they underestimate us.
I think that's remarkable. Melanie, you were mentioning before we started the conversation about going to Capitol Hill, and I'm just curious about what kind of response you've been getting, or what kind of engagement our elected officials are having around these issues. I know that they're definitely out in front, but what have you noticed in that regard?
I guess it was 2 weeks ago, the weeks of melding, right? With Latasha and Tamika and them, and then Rev on the other end, and we all were out there. No matter the COVID is here, we're going to still have to step up and keep fighting. Now, when it comes to what's happening on the Hill, not enough is happening on the Hill, right? And what I mean by that is you still have progressives. The Congressional Black Caucus unequivocally is the conscience of that Congress. And that's not a metaphor. It's real. Black Caucus is doing their job. Joyce Beatty and Sheila Jackson Lee and so many others, right? And the ecosystem of our Black political civil rights and social justice sectors are strong. So there's this moment I think we're in that we're going to have to really push our friends, push the White House, push the people that we put our lives on the line for, to move this country forward, because the opposite effect is not going to be what it traditionally has been. The democracy itself is in a tinderbox to just implode, as it's not a perfect system. As Latasha always reminds, this system wasn't built for us, but we helped you keep it going. And whatever it's going to transform to can't even get there if it falls apart and you have an autocracy or one party rule in this country. So we're at a critical point. And I look at Jeremiah, my great nephew that, 10 years old, and like, what is this going to look like for him and Journey, and Latasha's grandbabies and all that. And all of us have these young folks. What we're doing right now is that kind of existential moment, existential crisis, all of that. But it's also just like, I'm like pumped and ready to go out here and fight and keep fighting, because we're going to win. Like you said, Latasha, we're winning, but we got to win a whole lot more.
Glynda, I'm curious about people who has this moment, this moment in time motivated more of us to decide to take matters into our own hands and engage in the political process and become a part of not the system, but wanting to show up in ways that we haven't necessarily shown up before. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, you are seeing Black women politically leading in all fronts, right? One of the things, the tone of today that you hear from Latasha and Melanie is this level of, the Fannie Lou Hamer, Black women are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Black women, most of us didn't have the luxury to quarantine. Like literally Black women left their homes every single day over the last almost 600 days to work and keep this country moving. And so what you see is we've seen a steady increase in the number of Black women running for office. In 2020, we had a record number of Black women running for federal office. We saw a record number of nominees. We saw continued each election cycle, we see more women running and winning. Since Higher Heights was founded 10 years ago, we've seen incremental gains, but Black women are still severely underrepresented and underserved in this democracy. And in 2022, you're going to see we are on pace to see a record number of Black women running. We follow Black women running from the state legislature up, but there are Black women running for school boards across this country. Anecdotally, I will share with you, I think we can all attest that on our phones, we have what we call threads, right? I have the pleasure to be on a daily thread with these ladies, and we talk about everything. We probably talk less about politics than everything else, from celebrating our lives and supporting each other. But my what I would call my everyday friends, my sorority thread, my family thread, what I see is they are talking about politics now more than ever. And they're inspired. They are knocking on doors. I have more of my just everyday friends that I grew up with running for local office. And I celebrate their wins, and we celebrate them stepping off the sidelines in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm for their defeats. And so that's what I'm inspired about. It certainly is some dark days we're living in, but I'm inspired that these women know that they have a role to play in changing this, including, I always joke around, my best friend who lives in Georgia, Latasha. We almost got her there. Like, I feel like she's one step away from running for school board, right? We know that Black women have the lived experiences, the qualifications, and the skill sets that these women need to sit at these decision-making tables, because they come from different experiences than our white male counterparts. We're nurses. We are, we're educators. We're social workers. These are the women that we want to be at those tables fighting for the very policies that center Black women in our families.
Given that, I guess my next question is, how have you each been able to overcome some of the cynicism that, can settle in when we think about all that we have to overcome, all that, we're facing? And as you mentioned, that these are dark days. There's definitely a groundswell of energy behind disenfranchising us in ways that I know in my lifetime I haven't seen. So I want you all to talk about, how do you respond to that level of cynicism? How do you push past it and push through it?
I'm going to jump in, because I say this to one of my God-sent moms, C. Virginia Fields, who is a former elected official in New York City, who was jailed with King in Birmingham as a teenager. For this generation, my generation, and the generation, the Gen Zs and the millennials, we don't want to go back to the era that our forefathers fought for. And many of us have, regardless of where you are in social economic backgrounds, the gains that were made because of those who came before us, y'all ain't ready to live in a different time. So we gonna fight and not only hold ground on the progress we've made. In fact, we are supposed to be living in, we're supposed to be the leader of the free world. And we are certainly not leading in this country right now. And so in addition to holding the ground, I want us to innovate and imagine the possibilities of what the innovation of what voting rights looks like. What's the innovation of healthcare? And like I said, my God babies are not ready to live in another world. And so they're like, if you want to keep if you want to live the way you currently live in, folk, we need to fight, dig in. And like I said, dig in, but also build the plan forward.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off what my sister just said, Glynda just said, I think it's really important for us to really not get caught up in the minutia of just the electoral part of this process. This is really about agency, y'all. There are decisions, regardless of whether we agree with it or not. Every single one of us are literally impacted by decisions that are being made about our lives every day. We can't even go to work. Somebody sets the minimum wage of what we get paid. And Black women, why we should care? Because 68% of us are wage workers. We're hourly wage workers. So at the end of the day, there's somebody is actually deciding how much money that we get to actually go to work every day. Someone is deciding whether we have access to healthcare or not. Someone is actually deciding how money is allocated of what school system, whether this side of town is going to get a new school or another school. That's just a fact. That's factual. And so as long as there's somebody that's making decisions about our lives, that are making decisions about resources, tax dollars that we've spent, we got to be a part of the process. It's not about getting people to believe in the process. It's about getting people to believe in their sense of power. Because if anybody's going to make a decision, I say this all the time about LaTosha Brown going to be a part of that decision-making process, right? It ain't legitimate if I ain't in it. And so I think that what we have to also recognize that this is really around the cynicism about the system, the criticism about the system. That doesn't bother me because I understand that. I understand. I've voted for people who have disappointed me greatly. I have voted for folks and done work that I did not see the kind of change that I wanted to see. Absolutely. But I've also can say that I have voted for people to actually stop people who have been very, very harmful in my community, to stop them. I have also voted for people who have moved millions of dollars to my community, and I've seen the difference. At the end of the day, when you are a community, and we're just going to have to call it out in this way, when you are a community that our very humanity is under attack, and as far as I see that, that is war. When you are at war, you got to use every single tool on the table around getting power. This ain't about a popularity contest. This isn't about, okay, whether I believe in voting or not. The bottom line is, do you believe in protecting your community?
Other thing to look at when it comes to, we talk about politics and leveraging our power. It's also the people who gain from our economic power. I think part of it, even for myself, is like trying to figure out how to continue to put the pressure on, because a lot of things with the politics of this country, it's about who's got that bigger purse, who has, as in corporate America, as an example, that I think is really critical, that there's more pressure put on corporate America, because folks play two sides of the coin in corporate America when it comes to what's happening in this country. So they're not speaking up loud enough on voting rights. They're not speaking up, definitely not loud enough on what's happening to women. And so I think that's part of the idea of taking and say, hey, whether you're from inside or outside of a system, you have a way to, especially for Black women, because we also majority of us are heads of the household, right? What happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, and all that happened with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, all those who lost their lives unjustly in this country. Also, we're in a moment where, how do I want to say this? Folks had a lot of promises they made, just like the folks that had a lot of promises they made to get our vote. A lot of folks had made a lot of promises that they saw the need to make change. And guess what's happened? They're going right back to what was the normal way of doing. So the other part of it is for folks to know that if you're in corporate America, you have a voice, right? We want to make sure. And then if you need some help from outside, we also, as organizers and leaders in this space, have to push on that. And then we're doing that, but more and more, I think, has to happen.
For each one of you, I'd love to know, what do you see, in your opinion, based on your organizations, would be the smartest way to leverage our power right now, in this moment?
Well, Higher Heights is the political home for Black women, a place for us to build power, be informed, engage, and to take action. And in this moment, we need to take the power Black women have been recognized for, which is our voting in our organizing trips of organizing our house, our block, our church, our sorority to the polls, that we need to, ladies, 365 days a year, flex that power and build that power. And certainly, at the center of the work at Higher Heights is we believe that when you have diverse decision-making tables, those decision-making tables make better decisions. And so certainly we are continuing to invest in Black women's elected leadership. So if you're thinking about running for office, build with us, train with us. If you're running for office, it is about us supporting Black women who are running for office. And so that could be simply, volunteering for a candidate that inspires you and you believe is the difference that needs to be made in your local community. Open up those pocketbooks, ladies, and help fuel Black women running for office. Nielsen does an annual report, and back in 2017, they issued a report on Black women's consumer power. And what that report showed is that Black women are considered trendsetters. So not only are other Black women looking at what we're wearing, what we're saying, the world looks at Black women. And so use that influence to continue to talk to your network about the policies that you're concerned with. And at the end of the day, democracy doesn't begin and end on election day. In fact, the real work begins the day after elections. And so we need you to build with us and build with Melanie Campbell and the work she's doing with groups across the country to hold our elected officials accountable. And so that means talking to your elected officials, calling, the modern day tweet at them, lobby visits. Our government is our government, and it is open to us, and we must participate 365 days. And that is having a dialogue and, once again, holding our elected officials accountable. But I also want to use that we have to create the environment for our champions to push innovation. And so you shouldn't only talk to your elected officials when you're mad or you want to move something. We should be talking to our champions and giving them the space to continue to boldly lead. And so that's the work ahead, is for Black women to continue to do what we do, which is to defend this democracy, but more importantly, move this democracy to higher heights.
Melanie, I'd love to hear you piggyback on that. What can Black women do to support you in the work that you're doing with Black Civic Participation?
Definitely, you can go to blackwomentake.action.org. So if you want to get involved with what we're doing around continuing to put pressure on our elected officials in Washington to pass voting rights. Now we're going to add into to deal with issues around reproductive rights. They can do that. The other thing is support our institutions, not just the one that I'm leading. Because one of the things I also want to say for those who are listening, get involved in Higher Heights, get involved in Black Voters Matter. Get involved in the organizations that are right there. Start your own. Institution building is part of what we have to have in the movement. And that can be starting your own or getting involved in organizations that have been around for a long time. But do something and minimally put the money matters in movement. And lastly, there are elections happening every year. Trust and believe there's something going on in your community. So make sure you vote. If you have an election in 2021, and also if you hadn't got that vaccine, get that shot. Take that shot. It's a lifesaver. Trust me and believe me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Latasha, I'm going to give you the last word. You talked about agency. How can we be supportive of the work that you're doing?
Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. Almost anywhere I speak, I usually sing, and I'm not singing to entertain, even though that's great as well, but I'm really singing to bring what this is really about. And so I ditto everything that my sisters just raised. We've got to call, we've got to work. But I think the most important, we got to tap into our Black imaginations and our Black creativity. And we have to think about what is it that we want, that every single system in this country, if it is to be changed, yes, we've got work to do in the meantime, where we're literally shifting and responding to what is now. But we will constantly be stuck in that same paradigm if we are not taking the time to envision what is next. The former enslaved Africans, less than 9 years after slavery ended, they founded over 80 cities. Now here we got all of this wealth and all this education. Are we founding 80 to 90 cities a year? Right? And I'm raising that not as a critique of us. I'm raising it as an opportunity for us to remember who we are and what we have to do. And so I'm hoping that in this space, that what we see that this voting rights piece, right, this is the most critical issue that we are facing right now in terms of literally will impact our agency, our voice, and the shaping of public policy for years to come for our communities. We have no choice but to put everything down on the table to be involved in that. And as we're doing that, it's kind of like we got to build a plane as we fly it. As we're doing that, we also have to radically reimagine. That's why we need Glynda. I'm so glad my sister Glynda is doing this work. I need some new visionaries to take on the leadership in this country. I need some Black women to run for office that got a vision of what is different and what is possible and to push that forward. I need Melanie Campbell. I need a sister that for years saw work in the South and invested. I'm actually I'm a product of Black Youth Vote as a young woman years ago, over 20 something years ago, that someone in an organization actually fed into my leadership in the shaping and gave me the belief that I could actually create my own organization, that I could actually make change. And so I'm raising this because really what has always propelled our people has been our imagination.
Wow. Well, Glynda, Latasha, Melanie, thank you for pushing forward always. Thank you for your own vision and your visionary work. And I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today at the Root Institute. We admire your work, we treasure your work, and we support your work.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for who you are.